Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Longo. I am the GM of AI and ads at Microsoft. Interesting title. What that really means is that I lead a team that takes new AI advertising solutions out to the market, to brands and to agencies. I know there's a big group of both agencies and brands in the audience today, and it's really my pleasure to be talking to you here at Adobe Max about the future of creativity in a world of AI. Now, my goal of this presentation here over the next 20 minutes or so is to prove to you that this statement is true, that the future of creativity is inextricably linked to the future of AI. Now, it might seem contradictory at first, and certainly creativity has always been thought of as more of a unique premise for humans, but we envision at Microsoft a world where human creativity can be enhanced and amplified through AI. But before we unpack the future of creativity, let's first start with something that I'm sure that many of you in this room feel. I know I certainly do. It's something called the productivity paradox. And it's pretty clear that many of us feel that our capacity at work is really being stretched to the limit. And we've seen that through research on the Microsoft side. So we launched a work trend index survey in 2025 that told us that 80% of us don't have enough time or energy to do our jobs. While at the same time, the demands of leaders have picked up. So 53% of leaders say that productivity must rise. So what does this do? This is a squeeze, right? It puts a lot of pressure on all of us to do more when many of us already feel maxed out. So increasingly, people are turning to AI to bridge that capacity gap. And why do employees, turn to AI to bridge that capacity gap? Well, certainly they feel that it has unique strengths that could help them in their work, and whether that's, being on demand 24/7, so kind of like your 24/7 virtual assistant, or just the speed and the quality of the results, or the ability to just brainstorm and have endless stream of ideas on demand. So, whatever the reason, uh, you know, people in the work world, and especially in the worlds of advertising, marketing, and creativity, are finding themselves drifting more into AI. Now, let's talk about an example of putting AI creativity and productivity into action. This is a case study that we ran with the Rijksmuseum. And the goal here was to empower people with vision deficiency to experience some of the great artwork within the museum, something that was not able to be done in the past without the use of AI.
I'm Katelijn Denenkamp. I'm Manager Accessibility of the Rijksmuseum. There are so many artworks in the museum. There are almost 1 million. Everybody worldwide can see these artworks in our online collection, but there's a big group, the blind people and the people with low vision, who have no access to this online collection.
Our goal is to make art descriptions for the whole collection, describing the mood and describing the scene.
To describe ourselves, it would have taken hundreds of years. With AI, we can do this in a matter of hours.
The subject is a male with a reddish beard and mustache, featuring hints of brown and white. His green eyes gaze directly. His skin is pale, with pink cheeks. He wears a straw hat, light colored by dynamic, visible brushstrokes that add texture and movement.
We're only at the beginning of the journey to make the Rijksmuseum accessible for blind people and people with low vision. I hope we inspire all the museums in the world to make their artworks accessible for everyone worldwide.
When we strengthen our access to culture, we strengthen the culture itself, connecting our shared humanity. Art is for everyone.
For everyone. For everyone.
For everyone.
So that's an uplifting and I think a really cool example of the benefit AI could bring. And the key thing I really want to highlight here is the takeaway that if we did this ourselves, it would have taken hundreds of years, but with AI, we could do it within hours. So just think of the impact that that experiment had on the lives of the viewers at the Rijksmuseum. And that type of upside is really hard to argue with. And we see this across many different disciplines about, how AI assistants like Copilot are helping people at work. So 70% actually of knowledge workers, like all of us, say that Copilot is making them more productive. But I'm sure you're asking yourself, okay, really cool example. These productivity stats seem to make sense, but what's in it for me? So, like I said earlier, I know that there's a lot of brands and agencies in the room. So I wanted to really bring this to life in a real world example that would resonate. And let's say we're in a pitch scenario. And I think that that's something that certainly resonates with brands and with agencies. And let's say you lead global business development for an advertising agency, and you've got an RFP dropped on your desk for a big new running brand in the UK, and they're looking for a new agency. So you need to develop a pitch deck for your RFP, and you're actually a runner, but you don't know a lot about the industry. So you need to become an expert, and you need to become an expert quickly. Does a scenario like this sound pretty familiar to the group? I'm sure. I know it does for me. But what I want to do here is to, with the use of AI, to become an expert here and create a pitch deck in under 15 minutes with the help of AI and Copilot. I wish me good luck. So this is the new Copilot experience. If you haven't tried it already, it's pretty sleek. And again, in this scenario, I'm going to imagine that I'm leading a global agency development team. And I'm going to start off, I'm going to ask Copilot to give me a table with all the major running brands in the UK in column one, and then headquarters, revenue growth, biggest market, and the number of sports categories in the other column. So kind of a detailed ask, but pretty basic. And I'm also specified that I want this in a table format. So here Copilot delivers, and it's exactly what I got. I've got a nice organized table. You could see, by brand, headquarters, revenue, expected revenue growth, biggest market. Looks pretty good. But I'm going to go a little bit deeper here. I'm going to ask for some suggestions on what other data points I could add. So I'm going to say, Copilot, add some more data points. And then now it really expands out the additional detail. And I think this is even more impressive. So I got things like celebrity endorsements, e-commerce strength, retail presence, and even customer satisfaction. So now I've got 10 brands, 15 dimensions, and a lot of information. So I could take that and I could start analyzing, or I could go a little bit deeper and ask for Copilot to help me to analyze. So I'm going to ask Copilot, have a look at this data and give me a one-page market analysis and a one-pager with potential advertising strategies. So now Copilot is analyzing that data for me, and it's putting together suggestions for really an advertising strategy. So, going from that data to some analysis to strategic insights. So now I could take this analysis and, start to build a pitch deck, or I could keep going with Copilot. And the thing is, Copilot is not just a standalone AI tool. It's infused in a lot of Microsoft products. So across, PowerPoint and Excel and Word. I'm pretty sure you're most of you are heavy users of those tools, and Copilot could come along for the ride and help to just further your productivity while using those tools. You could come right out of the AI assistant and then bring that with you into these productivity tools. So if I go back to that table that I had initially, again, there's a lot of that we could squeeze out of that, to be a little bit more insightful, to communicate that we're, very much a data-driven agency with certainly clients are looking for that balance of creativity and, being data-driven. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to paste that table right into Excel. So I've copied into the Excel table, and now you could see Copilot comes with me. So Copilot's on the right-hand side, and you could do a lot of things with Copilot in Excel. You could ask it for formulas, which I do a lot because I always keep forgetting formulas. You could ask Copilot to sort data, highlight outliers, But in this scenario, I'm going to ask it for some charts that I want to use in the deck. So I'm asking for a pie chart with market share and a bar chart with the number of sports categories, because I think that would be pretty useful. So nothing advanced. I just use normal language to communicate with Copilot to get this information. And you'll see it brings back some pretty nice pie charts. Yeah, pretty fast and easy. But if you want to get a little bit more out of Copilot, to go from data to insights, for an example, you do have to go a little bit deeper to put in a bit more effort and use a bit more technique. So just to share a couple of best practices, the first is iterate, iterate, iterate. And as you're going back and forth and getting the information that you need for a big pitch, in this example, you'll likely need to iterate a lot. So, asking follow-up questions, changing the angle of the story, being more precise or being less precise. So, a lot of trial and error comes through in the process. Writing in the positive is also a best practice that we've learned here at Microsoft. If you tell Copilot that you don't want something, it could get confusing. And then if you're changing topics, let Copilot know. So just start a new chat, and it makes things a little bit less confusing and a bit more clear. So now if we go back to that Excel example, the same data set, there's actually a cool set of words here that could help us go to the next level. So I suggest you memorize this one. So that is add all insights to grid. So when you type this in and ask Copilot to add all insights to grid, Copilot will analyze the whole data set and it will try to find insights and relationships to the data and then add that to a separate tab. So wow, that with those magical words of adding, to grid, see, what you have here now is not just charts, but actual insights. So, this may or may not be super relevant, but it will get you thinking as you prepare for this pitch, and you'll probably be able to use a lot of it. So, with all this information that I have now, including insights, now I could go work on that pitch deck. Or I could keep going down the path with Copilot and actually have Copilot, ground itself in all this data and analysis that I've put together and develop a PowerPoint presentation. So here we go. Are you ready? And this is the deck that it created. So now you have a really well-structured deck with a market overview, insights, overall advertising strategy, specific tactics, including CSR and eco-friendly suggestions. And all in all, you have 22 slides of a pitch deck with speaker notes. Now, obviously, this isn't something that you would take and walk into a client room with and bring into your pitch, but what you do have is a really good starting point. Again, in under 15 minutes, using AI to help unlock productivity, and free up your time to be more strategic and creative. So let's go back to that stat of 70% of Copilot users say they were more productive. That's probably, a number now that you're saying, hey, why isn't that 100%? And I think it should be. I think we'll see that number, continue to increase as more people use AI and, do that kind of trial and error, that I showed in that example. But there's one problem, of course, with all of this, and that's the fact that productivity obviously is not the same as creativity. Now, increased productivity might free your time up to focus on more creative work, but what is AI really doing to actually help you be more creative? Well, let's start with what is an idea? How do you define an idea? And I like this definition by Steve Johnson because if this is true, and all new ideas are born through the mashing together and recombination of old ideas, then AI really has an incredible advantage of understanding a database of all new, old world ideas that could help create new ones. And at the core of creativity really is brainstorming. So coming up with new ideas and suggestions and new product lines based on kind of the recombination of old ideas, um, is something that could really get you off to a creative spark. So sometimes you might have a creative idea, but don't know how to convey it to others. And we all know that a great picture is worth 1,000 words. So let's say you're on the Lego creative team and you're brainstorming new ideas, and you've nailed toys and you've mastered entertainment. And what about branching out into footwear? Sounds like kind of a crazy idea, but with AI, you could create a prototype in a matter of seconds to convince others that this might be a potentially cool new idea. And I don't know about you, but I think I would wear some of these. Like, this is actually, I think, pretty interesting and compelling. So again, recombining, um, you know, uh, the footwear example from earlier with Lego, and just the creativity and the ability to prototype on demand is something that is a really big creativity lock. All right. Well, how about recombining all the old works of art of a master painter to create something truly new and unique? Well, Microsoft did just that. And that was the task of the Microsoft team who trained an AI on old Rembrandts to see if we could create something similar. And this is what it came up with: a new Rembrandt that was so faithfully and created that it fooled many critics. And this actually won a Cannes Lion Award a couple years ago. So just another example of recombination, taking past ideas and using AI to really drive creativity and create something new and compelling. And when we're talking about recombination of ideas, sometimes it does take a unique mind to see an existing solution and reforge it to solve some new problems. So let's take incubators. So a medical invention, certainly with incubators, that has reduced infant mortality rate by 75%. But while this has become a standard in the developed world, incubator access in developing countries are pretty scarce, and the cost is the first issue. The average unit costs $40,000, but that's not the biggest problem. 95% of incubators that are donated to developing worlds um, break within 5 years. So the lack of replacement parts and the technical expertise really renders these machines useless. So enter a startup called Neo Nurture, and Neo Nurture saw this problem and turned it on its head. Rather than focusing on what the developing world didn't have, they looked at what they did have. And what they did have was an abundance of cars and car mechanics. So, along the recombination theme, they took the parts of old cars and infused them into an incubator. And this incubator is made exclusively from parts you could find in an old Toyota. So the sealed beam headlights produce the warmth, the dashboard fans filter the air, and the door chimes act as alarms. So, if you can fix a broken headlight, you can fix this machine. So just a really creative way of recombining and the old and turning it into something fresh and new. So at the end of the day, I think you're seeing that the possible applications of AI aren't just limited by technology, but by the breadth of human imagination and that creative spark in using AI as a tool. And that was the case for Benjamin Kabe, who is a program manager at Microsoft. But he was a bit unfamiliar and intimidated by AI before building out a really unique project, which was creating an artificial AI nose.
The artificial nose is a tiny device that can be trained to recognize virtually any smell. It leverages machine learning to correlate the concentration of chemical compounds in the air to different kinds of smells. The device includes a Wi-Fi chip, which enables it to participate in Internet of Things scenarios. Let's dive into its architecture. At the hardware level, it starts with a gas sensor. An electrochemical reaction allows to measure the concentration of gases such as carbon monoxide, volatile organic compounds, and a few other molecules. You can also connect a fan to help with directing the smells toward the sensors, but this is completely optional. It does help quite a lot if you plan on having the sensors inside an enclosure, let alone one in the shape of a nose. The gas sensors and the fan are connected to a microcontroller. The microcontroller can easily be programmed so that sensor data can be accessed from the software. It is pretty straightforward to write an embedded application that reads and acquires the sensor data. But raw sensor data is not enough. We want to establish a correlation between the concentration of gases in the air and categories of smell, and more or less identify the olfactory fingerprint of each smell in the process. So the training data is initially collected and fed into Edge Impulse, but Azure Machine Learning Studio could also be used. Through Edge Impulse, the data is labeled and a model is then built and trained, a neural network in fact, to correlate the gas concentrations to categories of smell. And most importantly, Edge Impulse helps generate the software that can then be deployed back to the microcontroller. And with that, you have all the building blocks for building the artificial nose, the different drivers to interact with hardware sensors, the machine learning engine, TensorFlow Lite, plus the actual AI model. And in fact, you may want more than a smart nose. You may want to connect it to an IoT platform. So this is actually pretty easy. You just need to use the Azure IoT SDK for embedded C and then use it to communicate with the Azure IoT Central platform. Using Azure IoT Central, you can then trigger some rules whenever a bad smell is detected, for example. So that's the overall architecture. In fact, I actually went the extra mile, and there's even a 3D enclosure that you can print if you decide to build a nose for yourself.
So this artificial nose is a simple piece of technology that was designed again by Benjamin, during lockdown, and he wanted to bake better bread, and he wondered if he could train a sensor to smell when his bread was perfectly cooked before it burnt. So it started out as a fun experiment, blossomed really into a full-blown project, where you could see, like, you could detect and recognize any scent, as you saw there with recognizing the scent of a cup of coffee. So again, what was like started as a fun project is something that could be used in multiple different ways. If you think about, using an AI nose to detect maybe harmful gases in a building, or a fragrance company to uncover new scents. So there's so many different uses for something like this, and not intuitive that you would think, hey, you could train AI to smell, but indeed you can. So I'm going to go back now and revisit the original premise that the future of creativity is inextricably linked to the future of AI. And I hope through the data, the demos, the real life examples shared here today that I've proved this statement to be true, or at the very least, gotten you to think a little bit deeper. So let's recap three key takeaways. So first is the future of AI is the future of creativity. And I think that you saw that through the example shared. Second is our capacity gap really can be plugged with productivity hacks. And those productivity hacks free you up to be more creative. And then third takeaway is collaborate with AI. Like AI is your 24/7 on demand assistant and partner. and it's there to help you to collaborate and inspire your creativity further. Great. So those are the 3 key takeaways. That is a wrap. And I want to thank you again for spending time with me today to talk about the link between creativity and AI. And hope you've all, have a few key takeaways that you can bring with you. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of the Adobe Max conference. Thank you again.